For this Power BI report, I want to get this refresh history data using Power BI REST API and load it into a streaming dataset to create refresh history report. In our Power BI Dataset Refresh settings, we have one option to get refresh failure notification email, but there is no such option to get a refresh success notification. One simple workaround to get this notification is to subscribe to the report. Here we get option to schedule the subscription email, and we can select this option mentioned as after data refresh. This way, you will get the email notification, but it is limited to once in a day. There are a few more options available, where we can customize our email subject and message. For example, I can mention subject as refresh success report, and message as this dataset is refreshed successfully. Click on save. And now, if you will refresh your dataset, you will get the email notification. But as said, this is limited to only one email a day. Alright, to know about Power BI REST APIs, we need to open this Microsoft documentation page, where we will get all information about REST APIs. Since we are looking for dataset refresh history, I will click on this option. Get refresh history in group. Group is nothing but the Power BI workspaces. Here is the API URL, and I can click on try to test if this works or not. Later, I will register my service principal to run these APIs. To get this dataset ID and group ID, I can go to my Power BI workspace and select my dataset. So here is my PBI demo workspace, and I will select this dataset. Now from the URL address bar, I can copy the group ID and dataset ID. After that, I will click on Run button. And we can see the status code 200, and below that we will see the refresh history output in JSON format. You can verify the start time, end time, or the refresh status from your refresh history page. Now I need to register an app so that I can use a service principal to use these APIs to push data inside my dataset. But before that, I need to create a push dataset. For that, I will create a Power BI streaming dataset inside my workspace. Click on New and select Streaming Dataset. Then select API and click on Next. I can name it as my refresh history, and I will define my column names. For that, I can go back to the sample result page and copy all these column names and its data type. This will basically create a blank dataset inside our workspace, where we will push data using our REST API. One important thing to remember here is, we have to enable this option so that it will store the historical data of refresh history. Click on Create to create this dataset. Here is my streaming dataset, and let me create a blank tabular visual on top of it, which we are going to view as a report of refresh history. So I have created this table visual, and I can name this report as Report History Track. I will save this report. I know there is no any data at present, and we need to use our REST API to feed data into it. So let's go ahead and open this link to start registering our app. Here I need to choose my embedding solution. If my app is for customers outside organization, I will select first option, or if it is for internal, I will use the second option. First of all, we need to sign into Power BI, and then keep an appropriate name for the app. For this demo, I am using this name as my refresh history. I need to also mention the home URL. And for this demo, I will use this same documentation URL. Now I need to provide different type of access to this app. You can go back to the API documentation page, and you will see here the required scope. You can provide those access. I will select all of these access type for this app. Scroll down and click on Register. It will create the client ID and the secret, which will be used inside your applications to run. You can also go to the Azure portal inside Azure Active Directory, and you will find this app registration option. Here you will see your registered apps, or you can also register your app from this space. One important thing to do here is, you need to go inside API permissions and grant admin consent if required. If your API need tenant level access for read-write, you need to add these permissions from the space. To run the API, I am going to use Power Automate. You can use either PowerShell command, curl, or any other method to run these APIs based on your requirements. You will get both the commands from the Streaming Dataset API info option. I am selecting this manually trigger a flow option, but if required, you can create an automated flow or schedule flow as well. Click on Next Step and search for HTTP. because at this place, I will use my API details which will run on the trigger. Let's fill all these details. First of all, select the method, which in our case is a get method. Next is to add the API URL, which we can get it from the documentation page, which we just tested. It also has the group ID and the dataset ID of my actual dataset. Select the authentication type as Azure AD Authentication. Click on this Advanced option. This is the place where I will enter my client ID, tenant ID, and other details of my service principal. I can get all these details from here. So I will copy one by one and paste it in my Power Automate flow. In the Audience option, I will enter in URL analytics.windows.net/powerbi/API. Save this step and add another step to the flow. In this step, we want to get the data from above API run. So I will use JSON to store the output. For content, I can select body, and to define the schema of this JSON, I can again go back to the API page, where we tested the API, and we can copy this result for this purpose. Click on Generate Schema, and paste the copied result here, because we need the same format. After this, again click on Next Step, and now we will add our final step here. This step will push this entire data to our streaming dataset which we created. So I search for Power BI, and then I will select the option which says Add Rows to the Power BI dataset. Here I can select my PBI demo workspace, where I created the streaming dataset. And we know the default table name is real-time data. We know that our streaming datasets table is currently blank, and it has only column names in it. We created this schema for our streaming dataset, and same is visible here. Now I can map each of these fields with the previous step output of the JSON file, which will be filled by the API run. As that you can see, I have these fields from the previous step, and I can map it one by one to my streaming dataset table. If you need other fields, you need to define in your push dataset, and then map it from here. After this step, we don't need any further workarounds. So I will save my Power Automate flow. These 4 steps are going to do all the magic. As said, you can also apply an automated flow or a scheduled flow based on your requirements. Now it's time to trigger this flow and see if this is able to push data inside our streaming dataset or not. So I will click on Run this flow. And as that you can see, my flow has run successfully. Let's go back to our Power BI report and check the result. So I will refresh the browser. And here we go! We can now see the refresh history inside this visual. Now, if we have automated flow, we can continuously track the refresh history of my dataset. Keep in mind that this is in another dataset, which is tracking the refresh history of my actual dataset. This solution is very useful, and you can utilize Power BI REST APIs for various other requirements. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel for many such interesting topics in Power BI. Post your feedbacks and suggestions in comment box.